Good afternoon. Welcome to the first interaction class for programming in C++. I have with me Mr. Himadri Bhuiya, whom you must be at least electronically you must be familiar with him. He is the lead TA for this course and has been associated for since the beginning. And we are also assisted by Arup and Trilochon, the two other TAs, though they are physically not here today. So, since this is the first interaction class, we will primarily cover the first 4 weeks. So, that will be from module 1 to kind of module 20 or so, and the rest will be covered in the second interaction class. So, as you all have many of you have already sent a couple of queries. So, that we have compiled, I will go through them, try to answer those, and you can also online put queries. Himadri will collect those, and if there are distinct different queries coming up, then we will try to answer it. Just one point that I want to make to all of you regarding this interaction is, if you have a query, please try and ask a specific question. Do not ask general questions like please explain programming or please explain C++. This kind of, many of you often ask that, because certainly this is meant for a short interaction to address specific queries that cannot be addressed through offline interactions like going through the forum or through the mail and so on. So, please be specific, so that I can also provide a specific answer. Okay. So, with that interaction, with that introduction, let me get started. The first question is from Ankit, who says, what is the problem if the data members are not private? I think this is elementary. We know that if data members are not private, if they are public, then they can be directly accessed and modified from outside the class, which violates the basic data encapsulation principle of object oriented programming. And if that is allowed in general, then certainly we will not be able to ensure that every object is responsible for its own activities, for its own state changes, and no object would be able to trace that. So, this is kind of the beginning stuff that we have been talking about. Now, let me move on. There can be change of place between calling and called function. This is little confusing. I am assuming that you are asking about the order in which the calling function and the called function are placed in the code. So, yes, it is immaterial as to in which order you place them, but you will have to remember that the calling function must know the called function. So, if the called function is put after the calling function, then there will have to be a forward declaration of the called function in terms of its signature, or the called function could body could be in a different file also. Even in that case, we need a forward declaration. These are these have been, I mean, please go through the video and the presentations carefully. All these have been answered already in those in different modules. The next question is from Krishan, who says, in module 1 function pointer program, explain in detail every statement. So, I understand this has been explained already, but still I would take this question and try to give you some more inputs, because this is very, very critical. So, I mean, if you look at the first part of the code here we are trying to define a structure called geo object. So, rather geometric objects, and that has actually two parts. One is the enum, which is G code, and the other is a union. So, union, you remember that in union only one of the members at the runtime can actually be present. So, it is a union of CIR, REC or TRG. So, it says that there are 3 structures for circle, rectangle and triangle, and any one of them would be present at a given point of time, and G code puts an enumerated code which says which particular one is present. So, that is how the data is represented. So that this kind of geocode is a wrapper for any of these structures for circle, rectangle or the triangle. Now, in view of that, the actual function pointer is declared here. So, you can see it is totally in the style of a function. So, this is the return type and this is the parameter list, where we are taking only one geo object as a parameter, and then we want to actually draw that. Now, only thing to be noted is in the name of the function, instead of having a name like f g draw or go, this kind of, we are having a name which is dereferenced. So, you can see that star, just look at this star. So, which says that the draw func is actually not the name is star draw func. So, which makes draw func a pointer, and is a pointer to what? Is a pointer to all functions which take this parameter, that is struct geoobject type of parameter, and returns a void type, that is, it does not return anything. And so that we can refer to it easily, we have also put a type def, which mean that this draw func actually is not just the name of a function pointer, it is a type, the function pointer type. So, I can have several function pointers of this type. So, we are creating an alias for this function pointer name. So, that is a basic idea. Next three pieces of code, if you see, these are basically three different functions which take a geo object. In every case, the parameter has been kept uniform, but they are basically meant for drawing respective types of geometric objects. So, you can see the printf look differently, but all of them have the same type of signature, that is, they take a struct geo object as input and produces a void as output. So, each one of these, the draw circle, draw sar, draw rec and draw trg, are actually functions of this pointer type. So, this draw func pointer can actually take any one of these values, and that is precisely what we do here. We create an array of, you can see the initialization of these function pointers. So, these are like pointers, the function name itself is a pointer. This is something somewhat different from when you declare a pointer to an integer or a pointer to a double. Here, whenever you define a function, then you can say that the function name itself is a pointer. If f is a function, then f also is a function pointer. Of course, you can also use ampersand f, the typical way to get denote a pointer from a value, but this is not always not necessary for the function. So, now here you have three functions, function pointers which are initialized through this array, and it is clearly showing that the array is of type function pointer. So, what happens is, if at a later stage, if I know that I have a code data which is of circle type, and those if the data is of circle type, this is what I am specifying here to the G code, then naturally my logic says that I will be filling up this structure, because it is a circle structure, and those fields have been filled up here, and then I want to draw that. So, I actually want to call this function, but I do not, I want to write some code which will not explicitly call this function. So, what I write is, I make reference to this, I know that I have a circle. So, I would like to call this, that is the 0th element. What is the 0th element? 0th element is a circle element, the 0th element. So, I use the same code as go.g code, which has a value 0 through this enumeration, and I make use of that function which is at the 0th location of this array. So, this incidentally happens to be this function. So, when I make this whole call, it actually makes a call here. Whereas, if I go to the next one, when I have set the G code to rec, naturally the value of rec would be 1. It means that I am now using, let me erase the earlier one. So, now I am talking about this. So, rec has certainly value 1. So, I am talking about this structure, I fill up that structure, and again you just see these two codes are all exactly same, but they will behave differently, because geo.g code now is has the value 1. So, it will refer to the element 1 in the draw ARR array of function pointers. So, this will actually mean a call to this function draw rec. In the similar manner, if I had made it for the triangle, then this will mean. So, by using this, the basic advantage that we get is, if you look into these 3 codes, they all of them are identical. So, I can write only one piece of code which compile time is the same, but at the run time different functions are getting called through that, and that is a big use of the function pointers. We have seen later on in terms of virtual functions how this can be done in a more organized manner. Here the user is having to do everything, but in terms of virtual functions in C++, it will be much easier to do that, and system will take care of all this dynamic dispatch at the runtime. I hope this is clear, Krishan. If you have further queries, do write to us in the forum. Let us move on. I have to change to the next slide now. Okay. So, again another question from Krishan. I think it is the same thing that we have already discussed. What does type def do? Type def basically gives an alias name to any type, so that it becomes easier to use that. Like in the last slide only, we saw that we gave a name to the function pointer type. So, it becomes easier, we do not have to write very cumbersome things on that. And or it could be like you may want to give a meaningful name. Maybe you are talking about trying to make a date type which has a date, a day and a year. All of them are actually integer because they are numerical values, but you may want to call the date as a the day as a day type, the month as a month type, year as a year type. So, you can just type def int to 3 different possible names and use them. So, it just makes things more meaningful. That is the general use of the type def that we have. Moving on, difference between friend function and virtual function. Keshav, if you are asking this question, then you have to go deeply into the study again, because these are very fundamentally different. Because a friend function is a function that can access, like a member function can access everything of a class. If I have a function which is not a part of the class, but I make it a friend, then the friend will be able to access everything. That could be a global function, that could be a member function of some other class, but friendship is something which is awarded to a function, so that the function can access all internals of the class. In contrast, the virtual function is for a completely different purpose. For the virtual function is for dynamic dispatch, it is for runtime polymorphism, so that if I have a class hierarchy where there are more than every class may have the same function by the signature and name, and I do not know at the runtime which class has actually a runtime object, then I can call the function on that object, but depending on the particular class it came from, the corresponding function will get called. This is the purpose of the virtual function, which will gives us a runtime polymorphism mechanism. This is very similar to the kind of function pointer discussion we just saw, where we were explicitly writing code to do this, so that runtime we can decide which function to call. Similar thing, or in a more formal way, is done through the virtual function. So, a virtual function may also be a friend function for some other class, but other than that there is actually no relationship between direct relationship between a virtual function or a friend function. The next question is from Pankaj Shah on memory management. How C++ memory management functions are compiled to the assembly language, and how operating system allows such interfaces, or is the C directly access the memory access and heap memory and virtual memory and so on the stack. It is difficult to give a unique answer to this. In C, when you compile C, the memory management functions like malloc, calloc, free, etc., are usually implemented using certain system defined calls, which are already functions that are already been written in the assembly language. they are not compiled functions, they are hand coded by in the assembly. So, you make use of those to realize malloc free kind of function. So, you target the code onto them. In C++, the memory management functions like operator new or when you are doing a new operator, then they are built on top of could be either on top of the C functions like malloc, calloc. Internally they could use that, or they could directly use the system defined function. It is a choice of the compiler writer to decide how they want to do it, and there are, it is not specified by the language. And if you really want to see how it has been done, I would advise that if you are familiar, then look into the assembly translation of your program in the system. All IDs I am sorry, all IDs will allow you to do that. So, you can look at and see actually with how it is getting translated, but you will see between compilers the style will vary significantly. But this is an interesting question. Thank you, Pankaj, for asking this. I think then what is okay STL. Can you include STL in this course? Abhishek, it is really difficult. This is meant to be a first level course. This is only for 20 hours. So, I just gave a glimpses. If you actually see that at the very beginning when I tried to say why C++, I kind of little bit referred to STL in terms of say your vector or those kind of things, but in depth we have no scope of doing that. We are considering whether we do an advanced C++ course. If we do that, then STL would be covered in that. And here are some of the links where you will find extremely good material on STL. And if you want to have a command over STL, then I would suggest that you obviously first study about the containers, the different the vector, queue, stack, all these containers, and certainly study about the algorithms and IO stream. STL is a very big library. It is not easy to learn that in a short period of time, but if you have done the containers, algorithms, IO streams and utilities, then you will have a good command over better command over the C++ programming. Moving on to the next question by Rituraj, how to manage inputs from users if we want to make user input anything and work on it. I am assuming that what you wanted to ask is how to handle input if you do not know the type of data that you are getting. See, this is in principle this could be a completely unsolvable problem, because if you know nothing about the data, you just do not know how to read it, you do not know whether you would like to read 1 bit or 10 bits or 100 bits. So, it is very, very difficult. So, mostly even though when you assume that you do not know anything about the data, you assume that the data could be in terms of characters. So, if you are trying to input 127, then you do not input the whole binarized code of 127, because you do not know what you are expecting to input. Rather, you input character 1, character 2, character 7, or in general you can assume that you expect the input to be coming as string. And if it comes as a string, so in your reading code in the application, you will read the input purely as a string, and then based on whatever logic you could use. For example, it could be that the first input tells you what is the type of the second and third input. So, based on that, from the string you could convert subsequently to other formats. For example, if you are doing it in C, then as you have scanf which reads directly from the std in, you also have for example, scanf which does the same thing, but does it from a string value. So, you could read the whole input as a string and then use scanf and use different formatting to really parse out the input in terms of different types. But at some stage or other you will need to know what the type is, and if you would relate, then you will understand that this is one of the reasons, as at times we do not know really what kind of input is coming, particularly when we are in some remote operation, remote connections, and that is one of the reasons that C did provide a union type, where instead of specifying what kind of data you are putting in, you put the data in the union type and then set the tag for what union type data you have done. So, you could also use that kind of a mechanism, but finally, you will have to keep yourself limited to the formats given in scanf. So, usually it turns out easier that you read the whole thing as a string and then convert it as and when necessary in different other ways. And you will find equivalents of this in terms of IO stream in C++ as well. Okay, moving on, assignment related, okay, this is so this is an interesting one. So, so what you are saying that suppose we are commonly we are accustomed to seeing this. So, if we say this, then we know that it is here. So, there is an initial location called array, and then you have an offset I that are being added onto it. So, basically if you look at, then we say that this is equivalent of array plus I star. So, now as it turns out that the C compiler cannot really make out whether this is the starting address and this is the index or something, or it is the other way around. So, it basically treats this whole thing as this expression. So, that is what is made use of in here. So, when we write this 2 and these are the 2 points. So, as if this is the index, which actually it is not, I am sorry, as if this is the starting address, which actually it is not, this will be used as a part of the index, and this is the other, as if this is the index. So, you just invert and look at things differently. So, you do the same thing, like I wrote array I is equivalent of star array plus I. So, this is the basic golden rule. So, you do that same thing, you this is coming in place of the array here, and this is coming in place of I here. So, you write that expression and then you just simplify, because the 2 cancels out and you are just left with star array. Now, you again put it back into this notation. So, that turns out to be array 0, which happens to be 10, the array 0 here. So, that is a little bit of question to kind of show you that it is not necessary. I mean, we are mentally always thinking that the index has to be inside and the base has to be outside, but it is not necessary in terms of the C programming to do that. Well, solution to questions 3, 4, 5, 7. Yes, week 3 assignment, I think we did a couple of slips. I am sorry about that. So, we have released the solution of 4 and 5 already, because and 7 also will be done soon. These are giving different results in different IDs, but actually figured out there were small errors in terms of setting the problem. So, we will see how to re-evaluate and if required take them off the evaluation altogether. So, that nobody gets unduly penalized because of this. And this is the from the same set that let me take a different color. So, here this was the expected one, and this is so I would say I did observe this later on when it was brought to notice, but actually if you read through this code, you will find let me make this thinner. Okay. So, if you read this code, you will find that this is the first thing that will happen, right. So, I becomes 0, that is what will happen in the beginning and even before main starts. So, then the func is called, if func is called, I is changed to 3, and then a object is constructed by the default constructor, there is no constructor given here. So, by the default constructor, then you come across this, which is I plus plus, and there is a return. So, since this is a post increment, the function will keep 3, the pre-incremented value, as its return value, and then do the increment. So, I changes to 4, and after it does that, then it is about to return, but before a function can return, as we have discussed separately, that all local objects, obj is a local object of this function. So, all local objects will have to be destroyed. So, before it actually can return and come here, even before this can happen, it will have to go and call the destructor of the obj object. This is a critical point. So, at this point I is set to 10. So, now it becomes 10. So, when func comes back, it comes back with the value, return value that it had stored, which is 3, and the value of I, which is 10, and that is the expected output. But I do agree that some IDEs are showing this as a value 3 0, or basically if you change this, for example, if you change it to 5, then possibly in those IDEs you will see this as 3 5. So, what it is doing is it is holding on to the initial value of I here, is not taking effect of the side effect that is happening. I will see through this more to decide as to how what we do about the evaluation of this. I can show you as to how to get rid of this ambiguity separately. Let me go to the next slide. There seems to be some problem in slide changer. So, we are to the next slide. Now, if you see that the difference that I did is instead of doing them in the same C out, I have actually split them into a different C out, and if you do that, you will get this. So, there are the compilers, some of the compilers are doing the problem of holding on to the pre-call value of func, which was 0 here. So, when we separate out the 2 C outs, they become different statements. So, this holdback does not happen. So, these are some of the idiosyncrasies of compilers that incidentally got exposed through this particular problem. So, it is it would have been good not to have this ambiguity, but I am happy that we came across this, because that will show you that it is not everything is absolutely certain in terms of the compilers. They do behave in certain ways little bit erratically at times, and you need to be careful about that. In terms of question 7, actually I think question 7 is very straightforward. The answer expected output was 300, 300, 200, and possibly you got 200, 300, 200. So, I checked into that, there was nothing, there was a typo in terms of the last student S4 construction. So, this is this is marked out here. So, it was because of this typo, there is no programming issues here. So, because of this typo, we were getting a different result. FAQ on the forum, able to understand function pointer. This particular example itself we have discussed in depth. So, I will skip that. Explain about the STR Duper function in detail. Well, you can always read up the manual. Specific functions you should read up the manual. Please make it a habit of doing that, otherwise how many you will be able to question. But just since you have asked, so STR Duper, as the name suggests, it is string duplicate. DUP stands for duplicate. So, it is a string duplicate. So, it takes a string that is pointed to a character and then makes a copy of it. So, to make a copy, it needs an allocation. So, it uses malloc to allocate the adequate space and then copies that string, and then returns the pointer to the allocated space. So, the side effect of STR Duper is that dynamically memory has got allocated, and you hold the pointer to that. So, the it is your responsibility to later on free it up. So, STR Duper documentation would tell you that this allocation is done by malloc. So, the safe way to release this memory is to use the free function when you are done with the duplication process. In the following code, how many alignment occurs and why output is printed in reverse order. This has to do with, so actually this was there in the last run live session also. You should actually, when you have these questions, you should also go through the live session videos of earlier runs of the program. So, that many of your questions will get clarified there. So, we had discussed about this. So, what happens is, if you have a particular number represented, for example, what we have here, say here, in here. So, naturally you can see that this is written in hex code. So, you can see that there are basically 4 bytes like this, 2B, 1A, 7E and 8F. Now, naturally in memory they will have to come in a certain order from, you can put them from in this order or you can put them in this order. So, this is, if you put them from right to left order, that is the LSB, the least significant byte, if it goes to the highest address and then keeps coming down, or otherwise depending on that you will have 2 different styles. So, it is inherently defined in terms of the CPU as to whether you are doing a right to left or a left to right. Right to left is known as little endian and left to right is known as big endian. So, this code is illustrated for Intel x86 architecture, Intel x86 processor, which uses little endian. That is the reason you need to go in terms of from LSB onwards, you are going up on the address stream and you get the different bytes. If you were to do this on, of course, this is now less available on say Sun Spark CPU, then you will have to do the things in the reverse order, because Sun Spark uses a big endian system. Okay. So, you have a lot of questions on carriers, of course. So, Prakhar Gupta wants to know real importance of the C++ programming in industry application. Alvin wants to know how important C++ is in field of programming. Ayushi Deb, what are the advantages or benefits of using this course? Srividya, what is the main use of learning C++? So, basically you are asking why we are learning this course. That certainly is C++ is one of the very strong languages, and of course, if you ask me, even though I am offering this course, I would not say that learning C++ is the only good thing in programming or anything like that. I mean, you can learn programming in several different ways, and it is also not enough to just learn C++ if you want to have a good career in the industry in terms of software development, because there are so many different languages, and the different languages exist not just because they are they were created by different groups and different people. They exist because they have different purposes. So, primarily if you look at C++, C++ is primarily used for what is known as infrastructure programming or systems programming. That is, C++ builds those systems on which other systems run. For example, you have heard about database systems, relational database systems or other database systems. You must have heard about Oracle or say MySQL or say PostgreSQL. You may have heard about, you must have be familiar with several gaming applications. You would know about different scientific computing applications and so on. Those are more like the infrastructure programming, which are typically done in C++. Then C also is used very heavily, in fact, more heavily than C++, because it is a much older language. Lot of the embedded systems, for example, your programming for your mobile phone, your tablet and so on, are done in C as well as C++. So, operating system itself, the Linux operating system, the Windows operating system, they are written in C++. So, if you are targeting to go deeper in terms of your CS understanding and doing a more serious technical job in the software industry, learning C++ is absolutely important, or mastering C++ is important. If you are thinking in terms of more an application programming role, then you may actually should be focusing on some of the other languages. I will just show you a nice chart. So, this is called TOB index. TOB is a company who every month publishes the ranking of languages based on the volume of code is being written on them in several corners of the world. So, for several months, in fact several years now, in this ranking Java is well ahead of everyone else, because Java is very useful in terms of writing applications. Java cannot be used for writing systems program. You cannot write the engine of a database system in Java or an operating system in Java, because Java is not even a directly compiled language, but it is very easy in terms of writing different applications like transactional systems, financial applications and so on. So, if you look into this list, Java is closely followed by C, which is heavily used, and it is kind of for its legacy, it partly takes part in systems programming, partly in application programming. It is heavily there in the embedded system. So, it has got a 12% so called, I mean if I may say so, market share of programming, followed by Python, which is very efficient in terms of application programming, very easy to use, and then on fourth on the list comes C++. So, actually when you are learning C++ or you are focusing on programming in C++, that subsumes programming in C. So, kind of you can say that you are, by learning this, you are amongst the 20% of the programmers in the world who program either in C or C++. And if you have learned C++ well, then Java is kind of a cakewalk. You can learn it in a couple of days. Python is very easy to learn. So, kind of I would say that as you master C++, please try to also focus on Java and Python, so that you can be actually, if you see it is about 14, 26, about 40%, I mean you can be amongst the 40% of the world of programmers, and almost you can rest assured that most of the common tasks that software industry might throw at you, you will be very comfortable doing that. You can see some of the later languages on the on the list are not actually open languages, they are proprietary, like Visual Basic.net or C# and so on. So, they are OS specific languages and so on, or for other purposes like SQL. So, in terms of programming skill, I would say learning C++ gives you a core foundation on which you can build up by also picking up a bit of Java and Python, and you will be really sought after in the industry. How to become software engineer, software developer? Hemang, it is just hard work, it is nothing else. You need to master programming, but that is not enough. You need to be good at algorithms. So, study algorithms course, study data structure course, and if possible study the object modeling, object oriented system analysis kind of course at the minimum. So, if you know these four, then in general as a general application programmer, or even at a initial level systems programmer, you will have a lot of opportunity. But certainly if you want to go higher in terms of skills in software engineering, in software development, you should study specific courses like software engineering. You should study about different compiler, operating system and computer organization, these kind of courses further. Even though these start getting onto the hardware side, but to be a highly skilled software engineer, if you are really aiming for that, the knowledge of the computer systems, internals of the computer systems are also very important. But your first level target should be to focus on programming, do a lot of programming, read lot of code. There are several major code bases like GitHub, like Stack Overflow, CodeChef and so on. Go and pick up projects, write code, submit there, look at what others are doing, and pick up on algorithm data structure and object and data modeling. That will really give you a career boost. Can we make a program in C++ for solving logarithmic problems? I did not understand what is a logarithmic problem. If you are asking whether you can compute logarithm of a number, then yes, I mean that is there in C as well. That is in the math.h. But I do not think you are asking that. So please get back the Pangshu on the forum. How is the assessment pattern for the weekly assignments and so on? I would not like to discuss all these admin questions. You should just put it to the forum. Please conduct a special session on GUI programming, network programming. I wish I could do that, but the structure of NPTEL is very well defined, and we have only 20 hours to cover the basics. So, if at all we come back with another course on advanced C++ or more programming with C++, we will try to keep this in mind and cover this. But this course, it is not in the purview of this course. Why can't we combine C and C++ as their compilers are same and almost all this? Actually, you can combine. It's not that you cannot combine, but I'm not really sure of what kind of combination you meant. If you meant that whether you can write a single project where some code is written in C and some code is written in C++, well, you are pretty well advised to do that. There is no problem, you can do that. C++ compilers are able to execute C programs, compiled C programs and so on, though the reverse is not possible. But certain issues in the combination exist because C and C++ have separate standards, and at times they differ in the specification. So, maybe some codes cannot, even though it is a pure C, it will not compile as a C++, or in terms of a C++, or it will not compile correctly in terms of a C++ compiler. For example, in C it is pretty okay that I write a code where I have a variable named virtual. That is no problem. So, because virtual is not a keyword in C. So, now if I try to compile that code using a C++ compiler, C++ compiler would recognize virtual as a keyword. It is a protected one. So, you are not supposed to use it as a. So, there are issues in places. So, you cannot blindly take a C code and put it to a C++ compiler and get the same effect. I just gave you an example of a lexical problem. There are several other semantic problems as well. The exact meaning of quite a few things in C, which are naturally also there in C++, are somewhat different. So, it is better to invoke C or C++ compiler respectively. That is the reason you will find that for example, if you are using GCC, which I hope you are doing, then depending on the extension of your file name, GCC internally decides which compiler to invoke. So, if you know that your code is C, name your file as .c. If you know your code is C++, name your file as .cpp, .cxx something, and then you run GCC uniformly on that. Based on the file name, the GCC will decide which compiler to use. But if you force a C++ compiler on a pure C source, then most often it will work, but there will be cases where there will be surprise. You will not. You will find that a C code compiled by a C++ compiler will give you a different, may give you a different result, or may not compile, even though it is a perfectly working C code and compiles and runs well in a C compiler, right. So, please keep that in mind. Which IDE is better for C++ backend? All IDEs are same. IDEs are personal choices. Microsoft Visual Studio has VC++, which is very well acclaimed, very powerful, but it is priced. So, it depends on whether you can pay for it. If you can use that. Otherwise, there are several others which are free, open source. CodeBlock is less powerful, but pretty nice. Eclipse, which is a kind of a de facto standard IDE for Java, has perfectly good support for C++. You could use that. If you are on Linux, use the GNU's IDE and so on. So, any of these you can use, and you should get a good effect from that. I can understand that programming, Vishnupriya, which programming I do not know. Are there any model question papers? No, NPTEL does not do that. Singleton class, this pointer and consness, please specific questions. Which textbooks should I refer? I think at some point we have discussed this, but here are some of the common books. If you want to really go ahead, you can refer to. What is the easy way to learn programming? As some students are not known to any language. So, okay, you are discussing about some issues at your college at Samarat. I cannot really comment on that. I want to become a coding master. So, what can I do it? My programming skills are poor. Shubham, Rupam. Sir, please tell me about the understanding knowledge of C++ of mine. So, basically all of these questions are very similar. How to increase the skill? Some part of it we have already discussed as to how you become a good software engineer, software developer. I mean, besides programming, as I said, pick up on algorithms, data structure and modeling. But the basic point is learn by doing. I mean, write as much of code as you can, read as much of code as you can. Always refer to good libraries, good code repositories, and practice the principles, the coding guidelines and principles. There are a lot of online tutorials, training sites and so on. Seek help from that. And a bottom line is you have to be patient. Programming is not something that you can pick up in a course might run for 20 hours for 2 months, but that will just to get you initiated. But if we expect that by going through this course over 2 months and going through 20 hours of my lectures, you will become an expert programmer, I would try to caution you that that's not what is going to happen. You will need to burn a lot of midnight soil to really become a good programmer. And if you keep working on it, if you work hard, it's not a difficult thing. It's pretty straightforward. What is stack smashing detected error in C++? This is in the domain of computer safety. It basically means that stack buffer overflows. So, it is not in the scope of our course. Sir, will final exam question paper consist, do not ask these questions, this is a technical discussion. How many questions will there be? Technical discussion again. Ask all these on the forum. A namespace can be unnamed. This will come, this is not yet covered. So, this will come in the second interaction session. Ask these questions if you still have doubts. Fee, I will skip. What is C++? I will skip. Is in Word. We do I C programming. Kishore, question is unclear. Can you explain in depthly programming code, how to write a code in Java? We are talking about C++, template. Question by Kale, this will happen in the next interaction session. Assignment issues, write to forum, do not ask here. Some questions from few assignments are not solved clearly. We are trying to provide those solutions. If you have anything which specifically you are troubled with, do write in the forum, we will provide that. Please suggest some books. So, we have already discussed using G++ compiler in Linux terminal for compiling C++ compiles to which standard of C++. It depends on again this question I cannot answer, because I do not know which version of GCC compiler you are using. It depends on the version number. So, the best way is to whatever version you are using, just go to the documentation for that and find out which standard does it relate to. So, different standards of C++ have different versions of the GCC compiler. So, you will have to check up from the manual. Of course, if you are finding it difficult to find out, put in the question on the forum, we will send you the links of where you can find such information. I am a biology student, so for me C++ is so tough, teach in easy way. Shaktivel, Navneen, but C++ is not easy for most of us. I mean, it takes time. So, that you are a biology student is really encouraging, but I would also suggest that if you are a biology student and if you are learning C++ to help your biological computing, bioinformatics and all those kind of applications, your gene matching and those kind of, it would be much better to pick up Python. And now that you are going through C++ course anyway, If you just go and teach yourself Python, you will be able to pick it up very easily, and that will be lot more useful. It is much easier to use, and it has a number of third party libraries specifically for different biology related tasks. So, please make use of that if that is your target. How has C++ evolved with time? Please tell me about new features or newer C++ versions. We do not, as I have already said couple of times, we do not have the scope to discuss this here. If we pick up a advanced course, then we will discuss this. How to learn file handling? Again, the question is, we have done file handling in terms of this, but ask a specific question, we will answer. I am not understanding recursion properly, tell me in other languages. Recursion is simply in terms of trying to, what I would suggest that you put this to the forum. We will try to give you some references. First, try to understand recursion in terms of a mathematical concept. You can, whether you can solve a problem in the Fibonacci and the factorial you have seen, and there cannot be any better or more precise notion of recursion. Recursion is where you have a function that is described in terms of itself. You can compute that in terms of itself. So, to compute one value, you use 1, 2, 3 other values of the function, where you expect that you know the result. If you do not know them, then again you use the recursive definition to do that. So, every recursion has to finally end with certain values where you explicitly know what the function evaluates to, and that is what you have seen in terms of factorial. Like you assume that factorial 0 is 1, and then you can define factorial for any number, because it is factorial of any number is n times the factorial of n minus 1. So, there is nothing more to recursion than that. If you have any specific question in terms of recursive functions or programs, or their dynamics, then ask that specific questions, we will try to answer you on the forum. How to be strong in OOPS concepts? I mean, if you really are interested, then do a course on object oriented analysis design kind of Himanshu. Why the syntaxes of C++ was made so complicated? It is a relative perception, Stephen. It's you have to think of that. Actually, I find the syntax of C far more complicated, because it is not intuitive, but certainly if you think in comparison to Python, you have every reason to blame the syntax and semantics of C++, because it is meant for a lot more engineering oriented systems like systems programming and infrastructure programming, which light languages like Python cannot do. So, C++ does have to make use of that, but the point is, if you keep on practicing, you will at certain point you will understand that the syntax is actually not complicated, but there is a lot of order in terms of which looks complicated and chaotic at the very beginning. It's not an easy language for the beginner, but as you start practicing it over a couple of years, you will find that actually the C++ syntax is pretty intuitive, but it is only that you need to develop that intuition of programming and program thinking. Sir, I am looking forward to different competitive programming contests. All the best, Mayuk Chakraborty. Are there different algorithms I have to expertise? This is not a forum to discuss about competitive programming, Mayuk, I am sorry. So, please look at the net. Most powerful language in terms of systems programming, yes, C++ is. Many think that it is obsolete. Please send their references to me. I am ready to talk to them to make them understand what they do not know has been happening around C++ for last 10 years. I mean, do not worry about what others are thinking, Swarup Rani. Just focus on your learning, and if you can make good use of it, you can show your friends that well, it has a value, and certainly I believe that it has a tremendous value in terms of programming, in terms of the success of computing systems today. So, the basic fact that a language keeps on evolving after 40 years regularly on every 2 to 3 years. We had a standard in 2011, we had one in 2014, further add-ons in 2017, the next in 2019, 21 standard is being talked of is indication enough that the language has a lot of depth, but well, it is not for everybody, it is not for simple application programming. So, people get put off by that. Respected sir, first of all thank you, you can skip all those. I did not really understand internship. Oh, the question is internship. This is again a non-technical question, so I will skip that. Himadri, is there any significant question during the session that we should address? Why can't we declare destructor as private and constructor public, even though my compiler does not show any error? Which compiler are you using, Vilash? I do not know. You can always declare your destructor as private, there is not a problem, but the question is how will that destructor get called. So, that is something which has to be understood. So, these are different tricks, making destructor private or constructor private, doing things, these are different tricks of programming, be careful with that. See, in general the compiler will check that when an object is being constructed, whether it can be destructed. So, if it is private, the compiler may not have a way to call the, because you decide when the constructor gets called in some way or other, whether you are doing an operator new or you are doing a copy construction, but you do not decide when the destructor gets called. The compiler has to decide that. So, compiler has to have a free way to access the destructor, that is the basic point. Next question, Shehaj, what is the logic for not putting a termination or semicolon after defining macro? Any logic explanation for this? This is simply because the whole ball game of semicolon comes when it goes to parsing. The macros do not face up to parsing, macros are pre-processed. So, they are textually substituted. So, there every symbol is just a character, the semicolon does not have any other meaning, it is just another character, and it will get replaced wherever you have instantiated the macro. The semicolon has been brought in to terminate statements, because otherwise the parsing, which is the next stage, becomes difficult, because the parser cannot decide when one statement has ended and the other starts. So, using semicolon has been a very easy way to do that. Earlier languages like certain versions of Fortran and so on did not have such delimiters, and it gets so much difficult to write the compiler for that. But macro does not come into that part, because macro is a text processing preprocessor. So, it just substitutes strings. So, it has no specific meaning for the semicolon. Can I jump to the data segment part of the text part of using pointer arithmetic on a pointer in a stack part and then access the, you can do anything, Alan, but the point is if you are learning to program in a structured way, you should not do all this, because those kind of programs you can always write in C, you can also write them in C++, but if you do all that management yourself, then it just becomes that much more difficult to maintain by others. And see, the whole perspective that we lose out is we always think that I have written the program and I will manage that program and it will all end up with my assignment and my getting the grade, but the programming is actually not that. The code that you write might survive for 10 years, 20 years, and maybe even your people in your next generation would need to read that code and do something. So, it is absolutely necessary that you write something which is clean, which is understandable, which is maintainable, which is readable, and no tricks. That's the first thing in programming is do not use trick, do not try to write a smart code. That is the only possible way you can write the smartest program, that if you do not try to write any kind of smart code, just write the simple straightforward logic. Right. Static member always shared by class name, but not by its object. The static members, as the name is saying, every object does not have a separate member, that is the data member. A static member is one, it is one for every class. So, you are counting the number of objects created for a class. Naturally, every object should not have that member, it does not make any sense. There will have to be one member only for all the objects of that class. So, that is why it is a class member. So, it has no specific reason to be with the object. That is a specific purpose for which the static members were created. Abhishek, sir, why some programs appear to have different outputs on different compilers? You will have to go a little bit more to understand this, but the basic point is language standard defines three kind of things. One is one that is absolutely the same across all compilers, have to be the same. So, that is the rock solid part, which is a major part. Then there is another part which is called implementation defined, which says that the language is not specifying exactly how this will be implemented, but the compiler writer must specify that. So, the moment the compiler writer must specify that, naturally two compiler writer might do things differently and might specify different things, and the results will vary. In fact, there is a third type of things in a language standard, which says that certain things can be implementation dependent. The difference between implementation defined and implementation dependent in, if it is implementation defined, the compiler writer at least have to say what she has done. If it is implementation dependent feature, the compiler writer does not even have to say what she has done. She can jolly well do anything. So, now the question with that would be, does it violate the standard? It does not actually, because if you follow the basic principles that the standard is trying to preach, then some compiler may be more efficient than the other, but as long as you do not write smart code, then do not do many tricks and so on, the compilers will behave uniformly. But at times you could fall in this crack between how this compiler has interpreted that and how that other compiler has interpreted that, and there are several cases where you can see these differences happening, right. So, it is meant in that way. So, usually what we suggest is use compilers which are very widely accepted in the standard. So, use GCC compiler, which is standard one compiler available everywhere for everybody. So, you are guaranteed to have identical results wherever you run it. Sir, why some programs okay. So, the assignment Q3, this assignment this we have already discussed. What
you want some clarification?
What is I did not get your question, Vivek. Assignment 3, you are saying C out display 30 probably because of right to left associativity of the operator. No, that's not the case. It does not. See, it has to happen on the left. Unless I have done fun, I have streamed fun to C out, I do not have a stream where I can stream the next blank. So, what you are thinking may not exactly be the correct thing. You can look into go into the assembly and see exactly what code is getting generated. I did not get time, I will do that. I will do that and try to publish a note on the forum soon. What do you mean by interface implementation and application, as told several times in the lecture? Interface is a design, it is a classes and the methods, the data members and the methods, primarily the methods, that is, or I should actually refine and say there is primarily the public methods which is the interface, because that is what others can use. Your private methods are for your internal functioning. Implementation is how you write the code for that. So, I could have an abstract base class which just has the virtual functions, that is a pure interface. But when I derive, I may create corresponding functions for the pure virtual functions. I create non-pure virtual functions and I start implementing them, that is the implementation. And when I use these to write something, to create some effect, that is what the application is. So, one is the classes, the class library, which may ideally should have abstract based classes, which is pure interface, then classes which implement, which are derived from the abstract base class, and then the application which uses these implemented classes through the interface. So, the implementation is important because without that nothing will run, but the implementation is not what is known to the application. Application knows only the interface, and the implementation implements the interface. So, that is the kind of, you have to understand the object oriented principles some more. Maybe you can pick up the object oriented course, or actually if you are practicing Java, Java formalizes interface in a very significant way. So, again to summarize, interface would mean the public members of a public function member functions of a class. So, that is typically the interface. What is the size of an empty class? 1 byte. If the size of an empty class would have been 1 byte, then how much, what memory would you assign to that, and how would you compute the address of an object of that class? If it is a class, it can always be instantiated, and if it is instantiated, it is an object, and if it is an object, then I can always have an address of that object. So, if it is 0 byte, then it has no memory. I cannot assign any memory to that. So, it is specifically Srinidhi. So, it is specifically designed by Strauss-Trope that if an object, if a class is empty, its size of will still give you 1 byte, which is the unsigned character, which is the basic memory unit that of C++. Okay. Anything else, Himadri? Okay, then thank you all very much. I am sorry we have overshot time with plethora of questions. I wish you all a very happy learning, and keep with it with the remaining 4 weeks. Week 5 is already over, 6 is going on, 7, 8, and I think towards the end of the course I will again like to pick up another interactive session. But please when you come to the next session, please do put questions which are not answerable in the forum, are not non-technical. Don't ask non-technical questions. I am not going to address them at all. And also put up questions in a very targeted manner, so that I can answer them in a targeted way, and everybody can benefit in that. Thank you all very much for your attention and for attending this course, Programming on C++. Bye.